and welcome back to my little corner of the internet. I'm Tara, your strengths-based productivity and success coach, here to help you turn your hot messes into hot successes. Here on this channel, we tackle your challenges and talk about practical solutions that will help you live a life that you're crazy about, not one that's driving you crazy. So let's get right into it. So today I really just wanted to sit down and talk a little bit about work-life balance because we hear that all too often, but I prefer to refer to it as work-life integration because to me, balance is one, an outdated term, but also it's just not realistic for our lives and the way we live these days. So I don't know about you, but there have been times in my life where I have felt like no matter how hard I tried, I was failing at either work or life or sometimes both. So, in my previous life, before I became a productivity coach, I worked in higher ed. And higher ed is a demanding field. Most jobs are demanding in some way, shape, or form. But higher ed for me took a lot of time and energy. And there were times in my life where I would put family and personal life on the back burner because pretty much my whole identity was my job and what I did in higher ed. And several years ago, back in 2018, my dad was diagnosed with esophageal cancer. And that is really the moment where I realized that you can't balance and do one or the other. It's just nearly impossible to be able to do work and just work or focus just on family. When my dad got sick, I was living in North Carolina. My family was living in Pennsylvania, and I had to figure out how I was going to support my family as a daughter who loves her family very much. And so I had to figure out, how do I integrate work and life? And, that was 2018. That was before really remote work was as big of a deal as it is now. And it wasn't easy to figure out the priorities that I needed as far as, well, it was easy, obviously, because my family comes first. But I still had obligations at work to be able to accomplish. And there were just moments where I would break down because I felt like I was failing at both work and life because I wasn't able to focus my full attention on either one. When I was at work, I was thinking about my dad or my mom, taking care of my dad. When I was home in Pennsylvania, helping my family with whatever I could help with, I was checking emails and responding to text messages and wondering about the event that was happening on campus and whether my office was doing okay, or I was skipping a conference that I had registered for. And so, no matter what, my focus was where it needed to be in the moment, but I still felt that pang of guilt for having to make that decision between one or the other. So, all of that to say that really, I think that the term work life balance is flawed. There's no doubt about that. I mean, we've seen that all over the internet. And that's why I really try to focus more on intentionally using the language of work life integration, which we'll talk a little bit about that here in a minute. But I wanted to talk quickly about balance and why it is flawed. So, the way I think about balance, it assumes a one size fits all solution, and probably even more than that, it assumes a one size fits all ways solution. So, not only is it assuming that everyone can balance the same way, but it's also assuming that balance will look the same consistently throughout your entire life. And we all know that seasons of life require different demands of us based on what's going on in our surroundings. There are moments where family's going to come first. There are moments where work's going to come first. There are moments where they will blend in together, and you may feel more balanced and more in harmony with kind of both facets of your life. But assuming a balanced approach is just not fair, I think, to how life actually happens. And we have societal pressures to keep that balance, to maintain that kind of social media perfect image of what work and life looks like. And that can then create even more stress, because if you're seeing the highlight reel of someone's life where it looks like they are perfectly balancing work, life, and everything else in between, and you're not, that makes you feel less than. And balance is just not worth feeling less than. And that's why I wanted to talk about work life integration more, because we need to start thinking about and working towards blending our work lives and our personal lives all together. And also understanding, though, that there will be times where one takes precedent over the other. I also have learned that balance would assume that you have a very structured schedule or a very well fine-tuned routine. And the reality of that I have learned in my own personal experience, is that the more structure, well, actually, no, let me pause here. Structure is great. Structure is needed in our lives, especially for someone like me, who my strengths really lie along that executing phase, as far as like needing structure, discipline, consistency, all that kind of stuff. Structure is good. When we have very strict structure, though, that's when we run into trouble. The stricter your schedule, the more rigid your schedule is, the less margin and breathing room that your schedule has, the more likely that things are going to crumble beneath you. I know, like, I mean, things happen. We know that. So if I don't allow for some breathing room, that leads to stress and anxiety. And I will be the first to tell you that I experienced a lot of literal panic attacks if one thing derailed my entire schedule back in the day. And I also think a balance, I kind of mentioned this earlier, but balance is also like a dichotomy. You have an either or situation where integration is more about togetherness and that cohesiveness nature. And I even think about that like with hand movements. You see, I talk with my hands a lot, but with hand movements, when you think about what automatically do your hands do when you think about balance, I would assume this, right? We think of the scale, an old school scale, I should say. When we think about integration, my mind immediately goes to blending my hands together. And you can see how things work together, how things kind of are cohesive here. This is much stronger. This is a stronger bond than having your hands apart. So think about it that way. When you have work-life integration, you have a stronger bond in your entire life for more holistic well-being and a more holistic approach to your life. So to talk a little bit more about integration, we talked about how it creates that strengthening bond for support within your life. But there are a few kind of other pieces that it allows for. And I think about, balance has more of like a 50-50 approach. We talked about the scale. Integration is more like a roller coaster. It goes up and down. Some things may have bigger priorities. Sometimes then they may dip and may not be as important to you in that moment. It's all about the full ride and experience, not just about the ups or the downs, right? The ups or downs make the process more enjoyable, more exciting, more exhilarating for you. If any of this is sounding all too familiar to you so far and you're just plumb tired, as they say here in the South, of being overwhelmed, exhausted, and burnt out, my friend, it is time for you to get the support you deserve. Not just the support you need, but I emphasize the support that you deserve. My Hot Mess Overhaul Coaching Program, which is a 3-month coaching program, focuses on tapping into your strengths, regaining control of your life, finding your purpose again, and generally just turning your hot messes into hot successes. Snag your free 30-minute initial consultation call with me to learn more, to talk about your challenges, and to figure out how we can make your dreams a reality, because ultimately I want you to live a life you're crazy about, not one that's driving you crazy. Okay? Now that we've covered that, I want to jump back right into some practical strategies to help you implement a little bit more work-life integration into your life. The first recommendation that I have is to really start and evaluate your current situation. You can't know where you're going without first reflecting on where you are in the moment. So ask yourself some questions like, are you spending the not just enough time, but the amount of time that you want to be spending with your loved ones? Are you spending quality time with your family, with your friends? Are you getting out into the community as much as you want to? Some other questions to ask are the tasks at work, is your workload manageable? Are there things that you're dropping the ball on? Are there things that are just overwhelming? Or on the other end, too, which can cause burnout, are you not stimulated at work? And do you find yourself just daydreaming or kind of going through the motions at work? And then another thing to think about too are your hobbies. Like, are there hobbies or activities that you just don't do anymore? So those are some questions that you can ask yourself. You want to dig deep and really be honest and take some time to reflect on, where are you currently spending your time? What are you devoting your energy to? Is it what you want to be devoting your energy to? Or are there opportunities for some changes and shifts that you can think about? And then from there, you can define your vision for what you want your work-life integration to look like. This is where you need to get very specific. And if you had a clean slate and cleared away everything, what would your ideal day, week, month, year look like when you think about your work life, your personal life, and everything else in between? How do your days and how do your weeks flow? How do they look? Picture that, create that kind of what I call template or skeleton to really know how you want your work and life to ebb and flow throughout the days, weeks, months, and years. That is really important, because if you don't know what you want, then you'll never know how to actually get there. And another strategy is, we talked about integrating, and I really want you to think about integrating, not isolating. So, for instance, let's say you have a big meeting, but you also want to get some activity in. Why not turn that into a walking meeting? Or maybe you're listening to a podcast on your industry during dinner. That's still giving you some professional development off the clock while you're at home cooking dinner with your family. Or find opportunities. Are there ways to incorporate your strengths and personal hobbies into the work that you're doing? So I used to love photography, and that was something that I was always really interested in. I've got the fancy camera, all that jazz. And so when I was working in higher ed, I would find opportunities to be able to tap into that hobby. I would bring it into work. We would do kind of office family photos, and I would be the one to edit those photos and share those. Or if headshots were needed, I helped colleagues with that. And so that gave me an opportunity to not just silo and isolate my hobbies for after 5 o'clock, but instead to bring them in and have them be a part of my work day as well, which is so important because that's what integration is all about. It is about blending and ebbing and flowing, or, rather than bringing it into work, I often also use my decision making skills and my negotiation skills when purchasing items, or when deciding on groceries and how we're going to spend our money, or keeping track of our finances. So there are skills that are blending in between both my personal and work life. And that is the beauty of work life integration, is because you can tap into those strengths from different pockets of your life to really make your life better, more fulfilled, and to help you get into that flow state that we hear people talk about all the time. And one of the last things that I want to talk about when it comes to work life integration, because I feel like you can't talk about this without bringing up the concept of boundaries. And I was listening to a podcast this morning, and it really got me to think about, so boundaries are, if you think about like fences, when we put up a fence around our backyard, it's usually there to either keep things in. Like for me, I had a fence in my backyard because I wanted my dogs to stay inside my yard. But fences can also keep things out. I had a bear, believe it or not, I had a bear crash into my fence. I think it's a bear. My husband thinks it was a deer. That's not the point of the story. The point of the story was that the purpose of the fence was to keep things out. Sometimes you have folks that will barrel through your boundaries and you have to rebuild your boundary again. But the purpose of our fences and our boundaries are to either keep things in or to keep things out. But what I want you to think about too is that yes, boundaries are so important. Firm boundaries are important, but there's also some flexibility with boundaries. And I think that that's what's important to keep in mind with work-life integration. Fences typically come with some sort of gate so that the homeowner, let's say, can get in and out with ease, so that you can easily cut the grass, both inside and outside of the fence. The gates can be left open, but then you have the choice to close the gates when you need to and want to. So think about your boundaries as flexible, because you need to have boundaries, yes, but recognizing that sometimes your boundaries may change. Sometimes you may need to open the gate a little bit more. You may want to open the gate a little bit more, depending on the season of life. All right, so now that I went on that little tangent, let's go ahead and wrap this up a little bit. So in closing, I hope that you have recognized that balance is not necessarily a realistic goal, but rather that work-life integration may be something that's a little bit more realistic and more applicable to your life. And there are strategies to be able to blend your work and your life together to create that cohesive structure, to create that strong support for a holistic life that is, like I said, a life you love living, a life that you are crazy about. That's what's most important here, is to understand and give yourself grace on, you can't have one or the other. You shouldn't have to have one or the other. It's really about how do they both complement each other? How do your kind of different facets of your life not just complement each other, but enhance each other as well? And that's all I have for you today. Thanks for tuning in and being along the journey with some of my ramblings and analogies. I hope you feel inspired to rethink a little bit about your own work-life integration. Please share, like, comment, subscribe to my channel, all of that good stuff, because every little like, every little share, every little comment helps to increase my visibility, which ultimately helps me to achieve my goals of helping you and others turn their hot messes into hot successes. As always, thank you so much for joining me here in my little corner of the internet. You could have done 1,000 different things with your time, and you chose to spend some time with me. And just know that I am so, so, so grateful for that. I hope and wish a week filled of more hot successes than hot messes for you this week. And I just want you to know that you are one step closer to living a life that you are crazy about. I can't wait to see you next time. I hope to see you soon.